Imagine sitting at your daughter's graduation, clapping proudly when suddenly, your husband leans over and announces he is leaving you. But that was not the real shock. The real shock came seconds later, when he screamed something so explosive, the entire auditorium froze. What happened next changed everything forever. Husband announced he was leaving me at our daughter's graduation, but started screaming when The auditorium was buzzing with chatter. Parents clutched bouquets, cameras flashed, and the faint smell of fresh carnations lingered in the air. I sat stiffly in the second row, my hands folded tight in my lap, watching our daughter walk proudly across the stage. Her smile lit the room, and for a moment, everything felt right. But then my husband leaned close, his voice low and sharp against the cheering crowd. "I am leaving you after this," he whispered, his words slicing through the joy like broken glass. My chest tightened, the sound of clapping muffled in my ears, replaced by the pounding of my heart. I turned my head, searching his face, hoping it was a cruel mistake. His expression was calm, almost smug, as if he had rehearsed the announcement for weeks. I swallowed hard, forcing my eyes back to the stage, pretending to clap for the next name being called. But my hands trembled, and I felt the weight of the room pressing in. The scent of flowers now made me nauseous, too sweet, too heavy. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked shut. And then, as our daughter descended the steps, tassel bouncing, she caught sight of us. She waved, her eyes shining, completely unaware. I plastered on a smile, but my husband's smirk widened. That was when I leaned toward him, my voice steady but cold. I told him something I had kept hidden for months. The words left my mouth like a spark striking dry wood. His face drained of color. He lurched back in his chair, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then he erupted, his voice booming across the rows, shattering the polite applause. Gasps rippled through the audience. Heads turned, whispers swarmed, and all eyes locked on us. The tassel on our daughter's cap froze mid-swing as she saw him. His shouting drowned out the next graduate's name. Teachers rushed toward the stage, their faces tense, trying to keep the ceremony intact. Parents stared, their bouquets lowered, their phones no longer recording the joy but the chaos. My husband's hands shook as he pointed at me, his voice cracking with rage. "Tell them you are lying," he roared, spit catching in the air under the harsh lights. I sat perfectly still, my palms flat on my lap, the fabric of my dress damp from sweat. The truth hung heavy, undeniable, and the more he tried to smother it, the louder it seemed to echo. Our daughter's smile vanished, her eyes darting between us, confusion hardening into fear. The rows of families leaned closer, some whispering, others silent, as if watching a curtain rip open on a private play. My throat was dry, yet every detail sharpened around me. The sharp scent of carnations. The scrape of a folding chair dragged across the floor. The hum of the air conditioning that no one else seemed to hear. And then, with a suddenness that made the room quake, my husband shouted the one thing he had sworn never to reveal. The sound of it rolled through the auditorium like thunder, leaving nothing untouched. "The child is not mine," he bellowed, his voice breaking through the applause and cutting it dead. Gasps cracked across the auditorium like glass shattering. Mothers clutched their children's shoulders, fathers shifted uneasily in their seats, and cameras tilted away from the stage. Our daughter froze at the bottom of the steps, her diploma clutched so tight the paper bent. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The principal raised a hand, trying to calm the chaos, but my husband's fury only grew. He pounded his fist against the armrest, his face a storm of betrayal and rage. I felt every eye burning into me, weighing me down, demanding answers. The air turned thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to hear what I would say next. My breath caught in my chest, but I forced myself to stand. The legs of my chair screeched against the polished floor, a shrill sound that pierced the stunned silence. Dozens of eyes followed me, wide and unblinking, as though I had suddenly become the centerpiece of the ceremony. My knees trembled, yet I lifted my chin, refusing to shrink beneath his fury. The stage lights cast a pale glow across the crowd, and I could see my daughter's face, her eyes glistening, caught between pride and devastation. I wanted to run to her, shield her from the storm, but my husband's words kept circling the air, heavy and poisonous. "The child is not mine," he repeated, louder, almost desperate now, as if saying it again would make the earth tilt in his favor. Gasps rippled once more, followed by whispers that grew and twisted like wildfire spreading through dry brush. I could hear them clearly, murmurs of betrayal, judgment, curiosity, every syllable slicing deeper into my skin. The scent of carnations mixed with the sweat beading on my neck, cloying and unbearable. My daughter's diploma slipped from her trembling hands and fluttered to the floor with a dull thud that sounded far too final. Her classmates stared from the stage, their smiles gone, their tassels swaying with the stillness of statues. My husband's voice cracked into a scream, his fingers stabbing the air toward me, his rage almost unhinged. "Tell them it is not true. Tell them I am the father." But I did not flinch. My silence was louder than his screams, a wall he could not break through. The room seemed to tilt, the ceiling pressing down, the weight of every gaze suffocating, but I stood my ground. I could feel the truth rumbling beneath my ribs, clawing to escape, daring me to set it free. My lips parted, and the words slid out calm, sharp, impossible to take back. "You are not her father, and you always knew it." The moment the words left my mouth, the auditorium cracked open with sound. Some parents gasped so loudly it echoed like a wave slamming against stone. Others whispered frantically, clutching the arms of their spouses, wide-eyed with disbelief. My husband staggered back a step, as though my confession had physically struck him. His face drained of color, and his hand clutched the edge of his chair for balance. For a brief instant, the man who had always held himself with arrogance and control looked small, broken, and lost. But then the anger came rushing back. His voice rose again, sharp and wild. "You lied to me for 18 years. You made me raise a child that was never mine." Spittle flew with each word, his veins bulging, his fists trembling at his sides. Our daughter's breath hitched, her lips quivering as her wide eyes darted between us. She looked like a porcelain doll, fragile, on the verge of cracking. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her into my arms, but my husband's body shifted forward, blocking the path like a guard at the gates. The principal called for order, his voice trembling, but the crowd no longer listened. Every whisper was a knife. Every stare was a torch. The auditorium that had been filled with joy only moments before now felt like a courtroom, with me standing trial before an unforgiving jury. I clenched my hands, forcing my voice steady. "You knew from the beginning. You doubted it, you tested me, and I told you the truth long ago. You chose to stay. You chose to raise her. But do not dare stand here and destroy her day because of your pride." Gasps scattered again, this time mixed with low murmurs of agreement. My words seemed to slice through the fevered whispers, and the weight of them settled heavily in the air. His chest heaved, his face red and blotched, his eyes wild like a cornered animal. He turned to the audience, as if searching for an ally among strangers, his hand shaking as he pointed toward me. "She betrayed me. She ruined everything," he shouted. But instead of sympathy, he was met with narrowed eyes and pursed lips. Parents pulled their children closer. Teachers stood rigid, their bodies tense, as though they were ready to intervene. And my daughter, my beautiful girl, standing alone at the bottom of the stage, took a step forward, her voice breaking through the chaos, trembling yet strong. "Stop it. Both of you. This is my day." The silence that followed was sharper than any scream. Every head in the auditorium turned toward her. The weight of her words cut through the tension, silencing the whispers that had been crawling across the rows. Her voice, though unsteady, carried farther than I ever thought it could. She stood tall, the tassel on her cap swaying gently as if the world had finally gone still around her. Her hands, which had been trembling moments before, now clenched into fists at her sides. I worked for this, she said, her voice cracking, but steadying with each word. I earned every grade, every late night, every tear. And you, she turned her eyes on her father, chose this moment to make it about yourself. The crowd shifted, a low murmur of approval rippling through the rows like a slow tide. My husband's face twisted, caught between anger and humiliation. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out, just a rasp of breath, as if her words had stolen the air from his lungs. My daughter's eyes glistened, but she refused to let the tears fall. She stepped closer to us, her gown brushing against the floor, her voice rising louder, stronger. Even if you are not my biological father, you are the man who tucked me in when I was scared. You were the man who showed up at soccer games, even when you complained. You were the man who told me you loved me. Her words shook him more than my confession ever could. He shifted back, his jaw trembling, his hands shaking as though he had no anchor to hold him steady. And now, she continued, her voice fierce, you want to erase all of that because of pride? You want to scream in front of strangers and ruin the one day I will never get back. A hush swept over the auditorium. Even the air conditioner seemed to quiet, leaving only her voice echoing in the vast space. I watched her, stunned, my heart breaking and swelling all at once. She had grown into a woman right before my eyes, in the very moment her world had threatened to split apart. My husband's chest heaved, his eyes darting between her and me, searching for words, searching for a way to claw back control. But the power had shifted, and he knew it. The audience stared, not at me, not at him, but at her, the girl in the cap and gown, standing tall in the ruins of our family's secrets. She lifted her chin, her voice steady, unflinching. If you walk away today, you walk away from me forever. The words struck him harder than any slap. He froze, his mouth slightly open, his face pale under the harsh stage lights. The hand that had been pointing at me moments ago now dropped limply to his side, fingers twitching as if unsure whether to clench or reach out. Gasps swept through the crowd again, but softer this time, not from shock but from awe at her courage. Every eye was fixed on her, as though the entire world had shifted, and she was now the center of its gravity. Our daughter stood tall, her voice no longer trembling. I will not beg you to stay, she said, her words sharp, clear, and filled with a strength I had never heard before. I will not let you destroy me the way you are trying to destroy her. If you want to leave, then leave. But know this, when you walk out those doors, you are gone for good. A murmur of approval rose from somewhere in the back rows, quiet but firm, like the beginning of a storm. Parents nodded, teachers exchanged glances, and I could feel the tide of judgment turning away from me and pressing firmly against him. He looked around wildly, searching the faces in the crowd, desperate for one pair of eyes to side with him. But none did. He was no longer the wronged husband in their eyes. He was the man trying to ruin his daughter's triumph for his own bitterness. His chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, his jaw tight, his lips trembling with words he could not force out. For the first time in years, he looked powerless. My daughter bent down, picking up her diploma with a slow, deliberate motion. She straightened her gown, brushed the edge of the paper, and tucked it carefully under her arm as though reclaiming her moment from the wreckage. Her eyes burned into his, steady, unyielding. I do not need your name to define me. I define myself. A silence followed, heavy and absolute, and then the audience erupted in applause. Not the polite, measured clapping of a graduation ceremony, but thunderous, furious applause that shook the walls. The sound rolled through the auditorium, crashing over us like a tidal wave, drowning out his rage, his excuses, his power. I watched as his face twisted, his pride collapsing under the weight of that sound. He opened his mouth once more, but his voice was lost in the storm of hands clapping, feet stomping, and voices cheering for the girl he could no longer control. Our daughter turned her back to him and began to walk toward me, her head held high, her step steady. And in that moment, with the crowd roaring and my husband shrinking into his seat, I knew something had ended forever. She reached me, her gown swaying against her legs, her chin lifted with a quiet defiance that seemed to glow brighter than the stage lights. Her hand slipped into mine, firm and steady, and for the first time since the ceremony began, my heart loosened inside my chest. I squeezed her fingers, grounding her, grounding myself, as the applause thundered on around us. My husband sat rigid in his chair, his face a mask of fury and humiliation, his knuckles white against the armrest. He looked smaller now, dwarfed by the energy of the room, by the power of the daughter he thought he could shame. The principal, still holding the microphone, cleared his throat and tried to salvage the ceremony, his voice shaking as he called the next name. But no one was listening. Every gaze lingered on us, every whisper circling like smoke, curling into stories that would travel far beyond this auditorium. I could feel the heat of the moment on my skin, the weight of eyes pressing down, but I refused to let go of her hand. Together, we sat, side by side, two steady flames in the middle of a storm. My husband rose abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping hard against the floor. The sound cut through the clapping and drew a fresh wave of gasps. He stood tall, shoulders squared, his face a crimson mask of rage and shame. For a moment, I thought he might shout again, unleash another torrent of venom. But he did not. Instead, he turned on his heel, his shoes striking the polished floor with a sharp, echoing rhythm. Step after step, he marched down the aisle, his figure growing smaller, swallowed by the shadows at the back of the auditorium. The heavy doors swung open, a harsh creak followed by a slam that rattled the walls. And then he was gone. The applause did not stop. If anything, it grew louder, fiercer, rolling like thunder in support of the girl who had stood her ground. My daughter lifted her chin higher, her grip tightening in mine, and for the first time that day, I saw pride shining through the cracks of her pain. She had not only graduated, she had conquered. The ceremony carried on, though the energy in the room had shifted. Names were still called, tassels still swayed, and applause still echoed, but it all felt different, softer, warmer, as if the crowd itself had chosen to protect her. When the final graduate crossed the stage, the audience rose to their feet, their cheers filling the vast auditorium. My daughter and I stood together, her diploma clutched tight against her chest, her shoulders straight, her eyes steady. She looked older than she had that morning, stronger, as though she had shed the last pieces of the child I once tucked into bed. We walked out into the sunlight, the air crisp and clean, a new chapter stretching wide before us. The chaos, the shouting, the secrets, they were behind us now, sealed inside those walls. What remained was her future, bright and unshaken, a path she had claimed for herself with fire in her voice and courage in her heart. I looked at her, my heart swelling with both sorrow and pride, and whispered, "This is your day. No one can take it from you." She smiled, faint but fierce, and for the first time in years, I knew we would be just fine.